Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking something that is literally rewiring global trade right before our eyes. Have you heard of CBAM? It's not just some boring policy buzzword. It's honestly the new architecture of modern business. We're going to demystify this whole concept using some fantastic insights from our source material and see exactly how this single mechanism is driving the rise of the sustainable supply chain economy. To really wrap our heads around this shift, we're going to follow a quick roadmap today. First, introducing CBAM. Second, the supply chain domino effect. Third, accelerating the green shift. And finally, the sustainable economy arrives.
All right, let's jump straight into Section 1, introducing CBAM, decoding the catalyst. So what exactly is CBAM? You've probably seen this acronym floating around logistics briefings, or maybe it's even triggered a minor panic in your compliance department, right? Well, for a term that holds so much weight, its actual function is often buried under layers of really dense policy speak. Let's just strip away all that heavy jargon right now and look at the functional mechanics underneath.
Okay, so CBAM stands for the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. The absolute crucial point here is that it acts as an economic catalyst to shift global trade behavior. Think of it less like a basic tariff and more like a strict enforcer. It forces importers of really carbon-heavy goods, we're talking steel, aluminum, cement, fertilizer, to pay the exact same carbon price as domestic producers. It takes the environmental toll of production, which historically used to just get ignored, and turns it into a hard, inescapable financial reality right at the border. Moving right along to Section 2, the supply chain domino effect, cause and effect. The core conflict we're resolving here is pretty stark. In the old days, the traditional supply chain model was incredibly carbon-intensive. It basically incentivized finding the absolute cheapest global production, completely ignoring the environmental toll because, well, those emissions just weren't priced into the final good. Today, though, sustainable supply chain economics dictate a totally new reality, where carbon efficiency literally is cost efficiency. CBAM acts as the definitive dividing line between these two eras, firmly penalizing the old model and financially rewarding the new one. And this transition, it triggers a literal domino effect. It starts right at the border, where jurisdictions implement these carbon pricing equivalents. Suddenly, imagine a distant factory that relies heavily on cheap, dirty energy. Almost overnight, they find their goods are way too expensive to export to that regulated market. To survive, that factory is absolutely forced to pivot to cleaner energy. That one localized change then cascades downstream, forcing a massive supply network shift toward greener materials all over the globe. Which brings us to Section 3, accelerating the green shift, the Genecapsule thesis. Our source material from Genecapsule frames this perfectly, why CBAM is accelerating the rise of the sustainable supply chain economy. The phrasing there is super deliberate. We are not talking about a gradual, multi-generational evolution here. Because CBAM ties environmental impact directly to market access and profitability, it acts like rocket fuel. It takes what was once a long-term, kind of nice-to-have corporate sustainability goal and turns it into an immediate, pressing economic necessity. Now, what's really fascinating is how these mechanisms actually play out in the real world. When specific macroeconomic levers are pulled, like establishing carbon pricing parity and enforcing border tariffs based on emissions data, we see immediate, accelerated downstream effects. Procurement teams are out there rapidly reshuffling their global sourcing, dropping high-emission suppliers like a hot potato just to avoid those border taxes. At the very same time, manufacturers are pouring massive investments into green tech simply to keep their unit costs competitive. It's a forced, undeniable evolution across the entire sourcing network. And finally, Section 4, the sustainable economy arrives, and what this means for you. So here we are witnessing the rapid emergence of a sustainable supply chain economy. For the business professionals, logistics experts, and supply chain managers tuning in, your takeaway is absolute. Sustainability is no longer a separate department down the hall. It is the absolute core of your strategic operations. If your supply chain is carbon-heavy, your P&L is incredibly vulnerable. CBAM essentially guarantees that your carbon footprint and your financial costs are intertwined permanently. The rules of global trade have fundamentally changed, guys. The tools and frameworks you've relied on in the past, they just won't protect you in a world where carbon carries a hard price tag at the border. So the big question I want to leave you with is this: how will your role adapt in this newly accelerated sustainable economy? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and definitely keep exploring the real-world impacts of this massive shift. Catch you next time.